Welcome to the Did You Know Crypto podcast. I'm very excited for this episode. I think it's an extremely important topic. It doesn't matter what side of scaling debate, whether or not you're into Ethereum or proof of stake coins or anything. This is a topic I think that affects us all in the crypto community, and you may need to listen to it a couple times. If you have any questions, feel free to contact myself or Vin via Twitter or wherever else that we're found. You can find all that information in the show notes. I also want to mention, in the spirit of transparency, that while I do consider Vin a friend, we also have a business relationship. His company, COINGEEK, is a client of mine. Morgan Marketing is a company that I have that does graphic design and some of the marketing and social media management for COINGEEK and a couple of the platforms. Does not bring any conflict of interest, especially for this topic, but I just want to throw that out there in case anybody was ever wondering. So thank you for listening and enjoy the show. I'm very pleased to welcome VIN Armani, CTO of COINGEEK, Bitcoin evangelist, author of Self-Ownership, and serial entrepreneur. Vin, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Dustin. It's a real pleasure. I've been wanting to do this, do something with you on your podcast for a while. I've been listening to it and loving it. So thanks for having me on.
Well, I really appreciate that, me as well. And we were planning on actually talking about COINGEEK, but then this topic came up, and the reason that that we're talking right now specifically is because of that 15-minute video on Twitter that you released, giving kind of the overview not only of the basically this coming hash war on the 15th between Bitcoin Cash SV and ABC, but as well as that kind of a near apocalyptic warning to the whole proof of work world as a whole. And before we delve kind of into that specific warning, can you explain, we start kind of at the beginning, the genesis block, so to speak, of the SV-ABC split?
Yeah, that still is a mystery. That piece of the history is still yet to be written. It's a bit shrouded in, there's a bit of mist around that one. It's hard to know when this started, because the start, I guess, would have to be whenever Calvin Ayre, head of COINGEEK, and Craig Wright, the head of NCHAIN, made the decision that they were going to pursue this path toward, I guess this is a path toward conquest and control of Bitcoin, or at least that's the idea. And it's pretty hard to know when that started. What's interesting is that, so my professional background, some people know this, it's kind of interesting that I spent almost a decade as an escort, straight male escort. But then before that, yeah, I know, very risque for the people who did not know that, and actually ended up being probably the most famous that there has ever been in that profession. Including spending time 6 seasons on a TV show on Showtime as a star that was about that. But even before that, and the reason why I sort of ended up in that profession was because I had been very involved in the pickup artist scene in LA, and it had really been something that I was good at, because I've always been pretty good at reading people, and I have this weird intuition about what's going to happen when I meet somebody and what somebody is going to do. And it's just kind of a natural, I don't know whether it's a gift or a curse, but it's worked out for me well so far. But in May, after the last planned hard fork, or kind of during the hard fork, there was this COINGEEK conference in Hong Kong. And many of the sort of, I guess, leading people who were doing things and had projects in the space were invited out as guests to speak, and I was one of them. So I was flown out there. Also, my business partner in COINGEEK went out there as well. And on the last day, it was really interesting because it was kind of a very unified event. But on the last day, I remember sitting there with him and one other individual as well, and saying, I think there's going to be another split. Like, I'm just feeling, and I told them who it was going to be. and who it was going to be between and who the factions would be, and this is exactly who it is. And I didn't necessarily know why I felt that way, but there was something about the way things were being presented. There was something about almost a level of over the top hospitality that was being thrown that really felt to me like someone trying to sort of buy the allegiance of certain individuals. And clearly, with certain individuals, it worked. And it wasn't until, it wasn't more than a few weeks later that um, the initiatives started. These strange sort of initiatives that had come out of nowhere from CoinGeek, and it was me raising questions about those and seeing that they would create a split in the chain that sort of, well, first it got me blocked by Craig Wright. He began really maligning my character almost on a daily basis. He would be, even though I was blocked, he would be quoting my tweets and throwing insults at me. And then I really became persona non grata on the CoinGeek side. And it was just after that I noticed that everything that ABC would do in terms of the things that they were introducing would elicit just this over the top response from Craig Wright. And I was just sure from that point that, like, wow, these guys are really trying to have there be another implementation, split the chain. Why are they doing this? Like, what is this? This is so hard for, like, I don't understand, why would they want to do that? And I started playing out the scenarios in my head of like, okay, well, what would that mean? Okay, well, there would be another chain. Okay, but why would they want that? They wouldn't want that. And then I was listening to the rhetoric that was coming from Craig, and they actually started talking about these hash wars months ago, but I didn't understand, and I think I was at a place that even most of the people that I see in the ABC camp right now, I didn't really understand what a hash war was. And once I understood it, and I really have to thank Daniel Krawitz for that. He came out and we did, I guess that was last month. We did this event here with myself and him and Krista Rose here in New Hampshire, and he actually stayed at my house. He flew out and he stayed at my house, and it's an hour each way to the Boston airport, and it was an hour each way to Portsmouth. And so we had 3 days together and time together and in the car, and we talked a lot about this, and we talked a lot about Craig Wright and his and Daniel's thoughts. And I've been a huge fan of his since I really discovered and understood how prophetic his work was. And it was through that I, in talking with him, that I really started to think and understand what it was that Craig and Calvin were doing. And I understood that they had sort of unlocked another piece of Bitcoin. They had unlocked some things that Satoshi could not have thought of and are not in the white paper, but I think will be forever a part of Bitcoin now after this hash war. And clearly people don't see it yet. So maybe we can, there's so much to it. I have so much to say about this, but I mean, maybe we can start to unlock some of those things in this episode, because that would be great.
No, no, definitely. And I remember just reading on Twitter kind of the genesis of that, post CoinGeek, and I mean, Craig has seemed to have this, as you pointed out before, where he kind of will uh, deal with you for a period, but once he kind of figures out that you're not going to be an acolyte, it's kind of
Hmm.
all done, and then blocking. And I find that kind of very interesting, their approach, not that you're laying it out that way, of going over the top, trying to, wow. Because most people in this community, except for very early adopters that held on for years, are still, they may be doing, well, but they're not, extremely rich, right? So it is quite easy for someone like, myself or whatever, to be wowed by, kind of a display of opulence, and kind of, I don't know, bring people into the fold that way. If you can bribe, I guess, if you want to call it that way. And then if not, then you go to more drastic tactics. And then I guess that kind of where rolls into what we were alluding to a little bit ago of the dire predictions, and I'm kind of paraphrasing the video, but you basically said that in the event of a Satoshi Vision win on the Bitcoin Cash blockchain, that the smaller proof of work blockchains like Dash, Namecoin, I'm guessing Monero as well would be vulnerable, and possibly Bitcoin BTC itself. And I do really want to get really detailed here, and I am not a developer. I don't know coding. I've probably spent probably about 20 hours doing some very basic Python type stuff through YouTube videos. So I guess you could say I'm a preschool coder, and I would like to venture into these technical aspects as well, and just so that we could really kind of flesh it out, because there's a lot of, I would guess, a mixture of like just disdain and or kind of flippant, like whatever, I don't, this is not really our problem, coming from the BTC community. So I think it'd be really important to kind of really get down to the nuts and bolts.
Okay, so the good part about it is that basically a hash war is not primarily a technical battle.
Oh, okay.
So you don't need to be a coder at all to understand this. This is really more game theory. And that's one of the important things that my eyes have been opened. And again, I really have to thank Daniel Krawitz for that. His stuff is, if you may have to watch his videos, some of them I've watched dozens of times, and you may have to read his articles dozens of times because he's just so far out ahead. But when you get it, when you see it, you can't unsee it. So the first thing to remember about Bitcoin is that, and this is something that Craig says often, and this is really what he's talking about. He's not awesome at articulating himself, and I think he gets frustrated by that. Um, but he definitely does. I can tell that he understands. He's just not really all that great at articulating all the time. When he says Bitcoin is not about cryptography and it's not about the technical, it's about the economics. And really, it's what he means is it's the game theory. And so, the problem that Satoshi Nakamoto is solving with Bitcoin, the game theory problem, is the Byzantine generals problem. And I won't go deeply into the Byzantine generals problem. You can go and look it up. I've talked about it on my show. It's been talked about by Bitcoiners for years. But you can just go and check it out. It's a very well-known game theory problem. The essential sort of axiom within it is it's a group of generals that are besieging a city, and they're trying to communicate a plan to one another. But what they know is that there are traitors in their midst. They know that there are some of the lieutenants, some of the soldiers, some of the messengers, and even some of the generals are traitors who will try to uh, change their message that they're sending to the other generals about what they're going to do. It's basically they're taking a vote. If more than 50% of them vote to attack, they will all attack, and if they all attack, they'll win. Same goes for retreat. So it's fundamentally not a computer science problem per se, even though it was first sort of laid out in a computer science paper. What it really is it's a problem of human communication, and also deception. I mean, these are all human problems. But it is interesting that it is a war scenario that the Bitcoin white paper and the Bitcoin software is fundamentally solving. And so really what Craig figured out is something that I don't think Satoshi could have seen. So this is what is clearly not being understood particularly by a lot of the people on the ABC side, who seem to believe that at the end of this, there will be two chains standing, as it was with Ethereum and Ethereum Classic, as it was with BTC and BCH. That's not what is happening. So uh, instead of saying what a hash war is, maybe to start with like what a hash war is not. So what a hash war is not, first and foremost, is a hash war is not two chains go up and there's going to be two separate chains like we had with BTC and BCH. It's not two groups mining relatively peacefully on their own preferred chain, and it just goes on that way. And the exchanges say, "Oh, here's one SV coin, and here's one BCH." And the idea of this, and this was one thing that got me too early on. There are some developers that still don't get this. Craig's been saying, no, there's only going to be one ticker. There's not going to be a split in the ticker. This is not a split. This is a hash war. And so that's the first thing, is that it is not that. The second thing that it is not, and this is yet another, I see this meme going around. It is not, we're both going to mine, and then whichever chain is the longest and has the most proof of work because the most miners are mining on it, that's going to be the chain that that the exchanges will choose and that they will give the ticker to. No, that's not it either. That's not what a hash war is. What the idea of a hash war is, the best way to think about it is, it's a game of chicken. So what you are doing is you are not playing the chain, you are playing your opponent. And this is what Craig and Calvin have figured out. And it's probably in no small part due to the fact that Calvin Ayre, who is a self-made billionaire, he founded Bodog, the online gaming company, which is primarily centered around poker. And the little bit of time that I've spent with him, I have to tell you, most of the conversation during that time was about poker. So he loves poker. He's a poker player. And what they're doing is they're playing not the cards, not the hand, they're playing the man. And the idea in a hash war is, and Calvin has said this, there's a tweet of his where he's doing some yoga in Thailand, and Amari Sachet made fun of it in a recent interview where he said, "Oh yeah, I've been practicing doing yoga in Thailand." And it's like, okay, dude, but did you read the tweet? Because in the tweet he says, "I'm preparing mind and body for the coming hash war. I believe that these will become a regular fixture of the cryptocurrency ecosystem." And he said, "Winning will be defined as who is able to endure the most long-term pain in pursuit of their principles." And so what does that mean? What he's saying is, he's telling you what a hash war is right there. So what a hash war is it's basically a siege. You split the chain. First, you have to split the chain. And you have to split it in such a way that there is not replay protection. So that means all of the transactions that come onto the network go onto your chain and onto your opponent's chain. That's very important, because at the end of this, there's only going to be one chain standing. So you really don't want to lose valid transactions from people who have not taken a side. This is a super important. People who have consciously made the decision to not take a side, you want to take their transactions, or people who have chosen your side. What you don't want is people who have chosen the other side. Then what you do from there is you're going to do 51% attacks. So Satoshi Nakamoto in the white paper wrote that the system is secure so long as a majority of CPU power is controlled by honest nodes and not attacker nodes. So the attack against a Bitcoin network is to have 51% of the mining hash power. At that point, what you can do, since you have a majority, and you'll be getting the majority of Bitcoins mined, you'll be mining the majority of blocks. There are two main things that you can do to disrupt the chain. One is you can mine empty blocks. So that means you can just not put people's transactions in, which makes the mempool fill up. You still get your coins coming to you. You still build a chain, but until somebody else gets a block, there are no transactions that go in. So you basically screw it up in that way. So you imagine exchanges take 6 or 7 usually confirmations before they will credit to you on your account. So you imagine that there's a miner mining empty blocks and they just mine it for days. So for days, you've got unconfirmed transactions sitting in a mempool. That's the first thing that you could do. Even more dangerous, you could do blockchain reorganization, which means that you can actually rewrite the entire blockchain and like knock it down. You can take blocks out, you can rewrite it back. You can basically keep rewinding the blockchain back and back and back so that no transactions go through. And this is the game that Craig Wright and Calvin Ayre are going to play. What a hash war is a hash war is about, as we see, the first starting thing, and you'll see this, more exchanges will announce, but already Coinbase has announced, a number of others, many services such as Ledger, Trezor, Shapeshift has also announced that they will be shutting down withdrawals and deposits. So basically shutting down their Bitcoin Cash trading windows completely. And they said, we're shutting them down and we will reopen the trading windows when the network is stable, when we assess that the network is stable. So what is Craig doing? He's saying, I want you to mine and to go along with my software, my vision, the Satoshi vision, to go along and give and hand over the direction development of this chain to me. And if you don't, and this is what, if you go back to Roger Vere's, the email that he read today from Craig Wright, and it appeared that he did not understand the email, because what Craig said in the email is, I will stop, if you want a war, I will stop all trading. No one trades the coin for 2 years. That's what a hash war is. The idea of a hash war is miners are the biggest holders of any of these coins. Miners receive their revenue in that particular coin. If they can't offload that coin for fiat, they can't pay their employees in many cases. They certainly can't pay their electrical bills. They're relying at this point on being able to move that at exchange. Furthermore, a miner, a big miner like Bitmain's got over 1 million BCH, which are right now somewhere around $600. So they've got $600 million in holdings of BCH. But if it can't be traded, if the network is in such a state of disarray that none of the exchanges feel comfortable to reopen, and the price starts dropping, you could imagine what that does to the price. And so this is when Calvin was saying, who can take long-term pain in pursuit of their goals, pursuit of their principles? And Craig and Calvin have both said they're willing to expend the money. Remember, Calvin's got fiat money. Calvin's a fiat billionaire. He's not a Bitcoin billionaire. He's a fiat billionaire. So he can spend that money on the electricity. They're saying at the current hash rate, it'll be about $1 million a day. But the devs, and there's private channels of app and exchange devs, we're all trying to figure out how we're going to deal with this. The devs that I have talked to from the major exchanges, very, very high up at the biggest exchanges, have said, if this goes on for more than 3 weeks, we'll just delist. That's the talk around here. They'll just delist the coin. What would that mean for Jihan Wu? At 1 million BCH. 1 million BCH that now literally trade at zero because all the exchanges have delisted it except for a few minor ones, and it becomes a penny stock, especially in the middle of an IPO. So you see that what's happening here is it's more of a human game and a lot less of a technical game. The technical side is just causing havoc within a network. But that's relatively easy to do if you've got 51% of the hash power. The human side is who will blink first, because your choices are either mine on SV and give over control of the development direction of BCH to Craig Wright, or go off and go on to another chain. And so you can see what the logical progression is. If you win a battle on BCH, which is the 4th largest coin, now you just go and you just destroy the other coins, because you're going to suck up all the market share. And you could basically destroy them at will. I mean, the hash power on a Dash or a Litecoin is nothing compared to BCH. So that's basically that's the layout. That's the lay of the land of what is about to happen. And it's really I think Jihan Wu may know what is going on, but it's really unfortunate that it appears that many on the ABC side, and particularly Roger Ver, are not fully aware of what's in store for them.
So who's actually aligned now? I mean, the battle lines, obviously it's SV and ABC within this internal debate before it goes larger. But who's actually like on with Craig and CoinGeek, and then who's on the other side? I mean, and as far as like because it's Roger, Jihan, and it seems like ABC on one side and Craig, NCHAIN and CoinGeek on the other. What's needed to happen really? What's the first domino that needs to fall if Craig's going to win this internal?
Okay, so it's really there's really basically only two ways that this shakes out. Um, the first, and it all depends on Jihan Wu basically. Um, Via BTC, they may be able to bring some of their hash if they really care to do it. They may be able to bring some of their hash off of BTC, but really it's about how much hash comes off BTC to challenge Craig and Calvin. So right now they've got active. I think they have pretty close to 50% of the network at the moment. The last time that I checked and really sort of added it up between CoinGeek, BMG Pool, and SV Pool, BMG and SV Pool, which are all of theirs. The last time I checked, it was like right around like 47%, something like that. So I know for sure that they've got hash still to bring to bear, obviously. So really what it depends upon is it depends upon, will we see particularly the Chinese miners from BTC come down? Now, BTC has 10 times the total hash power as what's on BCH. If they decide to come in, then they could hold the ABC chain, but just holding the ABC chain is probably not going to be enough. Craig and Calvin will wait them out on the other chain, and they will attack as soon as any of that hash leaves. Because one of the things that you have to remember is that BCH right now, everybody mining BCH is mining at a loss. For the most part, there's almost nowhere in the world where you can get electricity cheap enough to mine Bitcoin Cash at a profit at the current price. So this will be Jihan Wu moving off hash that he otherwise could be using to make money on BTC. Now, he'd be doing it to defend ABC, which it's really more of an ideological point. It's really more because he hates Craig. It's not for the benefit of his holdings, because were ABC, the ABC side, which is basically, I mean, for the most part, it's Bitcoin.com, BTC.com, and via BTC, were they to just capitulate and run SV or even run Bitcoin Unlimited, which I know that Bitcoin.com has been running Bitcoin Unlimited for years, and they do have Bitcoin Unlimited nodes that are going to be even running during this hash battle. Bitcoin Unlimited has a setting where it can flip over to SV. So it runs ABC by default, but you can very quickly, with a single configuration, single line of code, just flip your miner over to mining the SV rule set. I think you're going to see a lot of that. If we see early capitulation from big miners, so even if you see via BTC capitulate, if you see Bitcoin.com capitulate, if you don't see Jihan Wu come in, then it's over. Like, this could be over in a day or two. If you do see Jihan Wu come down and you see the others hold strong, then it's really going to be a matter of whether they're willing to attack or not. So SV is going to be on the attack, and on the 17th, they've got this. It's a weapon. I mean, it was being called a stress test, but I had raised issues with it from the very beginning because it just, again, seemed like one of those things where I was like, this seems wrong to me. But CoinGeek has damn near gave a Medal of Honor yesterday in a release on their site to, naming the creators by name and saying how wonderful they were, and for creating this thing, this weapon that they call Satoshi's shotgun, which is basically fires all of these little transactions, millions of little transactions to fill up a mempool. And they made it pretty clear in that release, if you read through and decipher, that they're going to be firing that at the ABC chain. So there's going to be all kinds of attacks coming at ABC. It really all depends on if the ABC side is willing to go out and attack SV. They certainly have the developer talent to build attacker nodes. I've asked several of the ABC devs, and they seem pretty secure that if anybody was willing to throw hash to run that software, that attacker node software, that they've got it too. And they're much better devs than the devs on the SV side, to be honest. So yeah, I mean, really, that's what to look out for. It's to see, does the hash rate grow significantly? If it does, are we seeing blocks mined by either Antpool or some other Bitmain related enterprise? And are we seeing any sort of capitulation early on from any of the ABC side? I think particularly to look and see how quickly, if at all, Bitcoin.com capitulates. I think that would be a key one. If Roger just gave up the ghost on it, then, which would be in some ways understandable, considering that he has large holdings and he pays his whole company in BCH, that if you saw that happen, then that would pretty much be the death knell for ABC, at least on the BCH chain, I would say.
I don't know. I'm very skeptical on Jihan's. I understand his personal animosity towards them, but also trying to run an IPO and get that actually to go live at the same time that you're going to engage in a very, it seems very sketchy if you're actually serious about running an IPO, that you'd engage in a very kind of a personal, what outside people and investors would look like as a very petty battle to waste massive amounts of money on that. I think that he would either have to choose one or the other. And it's, as you've alluded to in the video and in this interview as well, that there seemed to be some underestimation of Craig's ability to game theory some of this stuff out. Because right now is a much better time than, say, 6 months ago or 8 months ago to have picked a fight with Jihan.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the IPO is a key part of why they chose to do it now. I mean, in war, timing is everything. And this IPO is a huge part of why they would fight this battle now, because I think anybody looking at it would say that, well, this is set to be the largest IPO in history of any company to do an initial public offering. This is set to be the largest, bigger than Facebook, the absolute largest. And for, a CEO of a company in the middle of the largest IPO ever, that's what you're going to show to shareholders? Now, here's what's the most interesting part about that, though, to me, as I've thought about it more. It's really going to turn out that that's exactly what he should be showing shareholders, because the landscape of Bitcoin has changed. This is just the first of what will be many hash wars. The hash war is now, it's out there. The meme is out there in the wild. And so really, it seems counterintuitive. And he probably won't do it because investors won't understand it. But really, he needs to be showing that he is willing to defend the chains that he's going to mine and that he's going to hold. That's a very important long-term strategy. We need to start looking at this. Chris DeRose said something at our Bitcoin Heretics event that we had here. We were talking about the ideal Bitcoiner. And somebody in the audience brought up the notion that Bitcoin is a religion. And I think I've said that many times, and I agreed, and Daniel Krawitz agreed as well. And Chris said something interesting. He said he's very sympathetic to the idea of a civic religion where the state is actually kind of the religion. And so he was saying, look, like in America, we have these holidays, and those are Holiday literally means it comes from holy day. And those holidays, 4th of July is our Day of the Dead, is Memorial Day, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Our May Day is Labor Day. And so he said, I think what we're seeing more is that we're seeing that Bitcoin is not a religion, but that Bitcoin is a nation. And I think that's it's a virtual nation. It's a much better analogy, a much better metaphor. And Jihan has invested in the nation of BCH, and the nation of BCH is about to undergo a civil war. And for him to not take a side in that civil war, especially when what stands to happen if he doesn't take a stand in that civil war is that his number one enemy is going to gain control of the development direction. That's not a smart move either. So he's really stuck between a rock and a hard place. And that's why, again, I think people have very much underestimated both Craig Wright and Calvin Ayre in this.
It's interesting. A mutual friend of ours, Jack Spirko, had been. I remember listening to his podcast back in, gosh, I was probably 2012, 2013, and it was already starting to talk about the ideas of virtual nations and the concepts of nations kind of changing from the kind of geographic nation state to the virtual one where there's well hopefully voluntary cooperation and coming together based on mutual interest, although that could go other ways as well. But originally that was the idea. It started to form where countries like Estonia were offering virtual citizenship, and that was kind of a very early concept of it. But as we move into, as you say, the Bitcoin, Bitcoin Cash as communities, as nations unto themselves, where people have their own culture, their own. I mean, you kind of even see like on like dietary habits in certain sections. And I'd written like a brief article, I don't know, about a month ago on the idea of, because I was thinking more on the idea of the fork and the kind of the idea of the fork as being kind of this peaceful way for two groups that have smaller, usually large animosity towards each other, to be able to break away peacefully and kind of go their own way, do their own thing. And to me that was like a very beautiful concept, a kind of a new way to look at with the virtual nation. But now as we're kind of fleshing this concept out of the hash war, I start to see like, well, on the flip side, there's this kind of very pacifistic idea of like, let's just fork, go our own ways and do that. And then on the other side, the yin and yang of it, there's the hash war. And it's if what we're positing here is true, it sounds to me a lot like kind of that 30 years war in the post Reformation Europe. You had the larger factions of Protestantism and Catholicism battling out in large bloody wars. And I think it was until 1945 it was the deadliest war in kind of that Germanic area, Germany's history. And
it was 8 million dead.
Yeah. And especially for a population at that time, I mean that's massively disastrous. And you had the larger factions, but you also had smaller factions battling out, smaller factions having to go out and hide just to survive. In their case, physical mountains and all that. And it's very interesting because the hash war seems to be totally a winner take all conquest, right? It's not. The Mongols operated a little bit different. To digress a little bit, they kind of had they would conquer and install kind of Vichy governments in their wake. But this is definitely SV's motivation seems to be kind of born out of, at least partly for one of the actors, spite, and I think hatred for the way that that he was treated, whether earned or not. But conquest is definitely the goal. I mean, what do you think the implications are for kind of this concept of the Bitcoin nation, or fill in the blank coin nation, as we move forward?
Well, this is something towards the end of my book, Self-Ownership, that I don't know if I want to call it prophesied, but it was certainly something I had been thinking about, and I called it the crypto savage. And maybe less than a nation per se. I think the blockchains are nations, but I think that the way of viewing the world is in other words, the culture is what I called crypto savage. That is sort of the hidden other. And what's interesting, I mean, we're sitting here, we're talking about this, and I was thinking about this today as I was walking around, and I was like, wow, um, this is potentially, if Bitcoin is to become world money, and I think that this and we can talk about why I think this, but I think that this war is actually proof that Bitcoin is going to become world money, that it is going to be very important, and that this is the move. I tweeted today that this is similar to the Trojan War, how that was really where Western culture started. That was when the what is the Western world started with the Greeks, but also the Romans. Um, they draw their mythological history back to sort of the first Roman was Aeneas, who was from the Trojan side, the losing side. He was one of the only people to survive, and he left with his group and landed in Italy. And Julius Caesar and Augustus directly drew their lineage back to this person. So it was like not only the Greek world, but the Roman world from this Trojan War. And before that, and even during the sort of stories of Homer and whatnot, you see the gods involved. It's very mythological. After that, they step into the historical age. History begins. And I think that that's what we're seeing right now, is that before this point, it was very mythological. And also, to the point of a peaceful fork, I think that's gone. And the reason why I think it's gone is it's a matter of territory. I guess that we imagine that the digital world is somehow limitless, and in many ways it is, but the valuable territory is not. And so at the time when these early forks, the Litecoins and then Dash, and you had Namecoin and all of these, even BTC wasn't worth that much. But in the last several years, I mean, I bought my first Bitcoin in 2012, and it was $15. And the funny thing about it was so I was buying it hand to hand, and there was a guy I was dealing with, and I remember I've still got the email, and I look at it from time to time when I want to feel like a real ass. But it was December of 2012, and he hit me up and he said, "Hey man, I've got 100 Bitcoin that I'll sell you for just under spot." So and I was like, "Well, what spot?" And he said, like $14.40 for 100 Bitcoin. And I was like, I just got the email. I was like, I think it's too high. And I look at that email from time to time. I mean, 9 months later, it went to 1,000. So it helps to put yourself in the situation of like, if I thought $14 for a Bitcoin was too high in 2012, and a lot of these coins, it was 2012, 2013 early that they sort of spun off. The territory was wide open. Who cares? You go, you fork. No, not anymore. And now it's worth too much. You've got already exchanges that are trading it. You've got the brand. I mean, we saw that with BTC, BCH, but I think even probably that was the last time you were going to have that. I don't think you're going to have any more peaceful forks. So you're definitely not, now that there are hash wars. And, as you pointed out, the sort of smaller factions, we're already seeing that. There's this shark pool that popped up that are now, they're talking about, join us. We're going to go basically raid the alts like Vikings. We're going to mine empty blocks. And then we're going to sell them for BCH. And that is a viable thing to do. And I don't necessarily think that it has to be Craig and Calvin going after these alts. I think there's going to be groups of individuals who will do that, and I think that they'll reach out to them for weapons. I mean, these guys will be able to sell them weapons now. They're clearly developing weapons already. So, I mean, so we've moved into a whole new realm of this. But the positive part about it is, just like with the Trojan War, is that the Trojan War was 10 years of besieging Troy. And all of these heroes were there, and the greatest minds of their time their eyes were focused on these events. And all of us right now, we're all looking at a single thing. We're united. Even people from the alts, even now the BTC people are looking in, and some are dismissing it for now, except not the smart ones. Like we just saw, there's an article from Craig had posted a screenshot of an email, and then CoinGeek picked it up about Greg Maxwell, the former chief technical officer of Blockstream, reaching out to Craig with the subject line of saying, "I think we have a shared interest," or "I think we have a mutual interest," and then trying to sort of talk to Craig about, "Oh, it could go wrong for you if you don't do this," and it's just like, man, this is playing out like a Greek, like the story of Leonidas and the 300. You know what I mean? Here's this guy who was cast off, who's nonetheless incredibly knowledgeable and talented when it comes to Bitcoin, trying to throw his lot in with the guy, with the new sort of tyrant who's waging a threat. It's unbelievable how this thing is playing out. Which again goes back to Daniel Krawitz, who has been saying for a long time, this is Narnia. You know, that's his big shtick. This is Narnia, or this is Middle Earth, because Bitcoin is an imaginary good. So of course the world of Bitcoin is imaginary. Of course it's going to relate to these things. But at the end of the day, like, it's also real money. So what's going to be different now is we've seen since the 30 Years' War, you know, if you take it from then to now, the war in Syria is really bad. It's really bad. But is it though? You know what I mean? Like, is it really compared to the 30 Years' War? I mean, people were able to leave. You've got refugees and all of this. People just didn't have to stick around. There was actually somewhere for them to leave to. Weapons are relatively precision guided. Like, it really is mostly soldiers that are dying. There are obviously civilian casualties, but it's nothing compared to Vietnam. It's nothing compared to even Iraq. Nothing compared to Afghanistan even. So wars are getting less and less in terms of the physical violence. And now we've got the situation that's so interesting, because throughout history, wars have been for resources. So whether that's the conquistadors going over and trying to take gold out of the New World, you know, and going and raiding the Aztecs, to the U.S. going over in search of oil, you know, and attacking in the Middle East and going to war for oil. In all of those cases, you had a physical good. That means if you want it, you've got to take it out of the hands of the person who has it, and that's physical hands, and they don't want to hand it over, so it's going to have to be a physical fight. In this case, it's digital gold. As much as I hate that meme, it works here. So it's digital gold, so the fight is going to be in the digital realm. But if people aren't careful, there's going to be the same types of destruction and the same types of casualties. Real people are going to lose real money. And you imagine now it's not a huge deal, because most of the people, even who are taking notice of this, aren't reliant on the stability of the BCH network in order to feed their children. But that's going to change. If Bitcoin is to become world money, there's going to be a lot more at stake. And so miners are going to go to war, and that war is going to affect real people and real people's lives in the way that physical wars have been. So there are a lot of analogs, and it's a very interesting time. But what Bitcoin is will be forever changed on November 15th.
It's really interesting that you mentioned the shark, the shark pool, and that it's kind of almost like a proof of work pirate. And
Exactly.
it's really, because that was a lot of in earlier history, the reason for people to come together into communities, the people to, especially for the kind of advent of the nation state as well, and especially on the high seas, right? So if you're flying a certain flag, you were left alone by certain privateers, and if you were flying the wrong flag, you were not. And then there was also the kind of the true pirates who would kind of attack anybody per se, kind of depending. Some of them were kind of given cover or paid off by one group or the other to not touch their stuff. But it's kind of interesting. That kind of delves back into when you're talking about that, if SV is able to accomplish their goal of gaining control, everybody else capitulates to them. They are victorious in the battle over BCH, and they now have, basically the full power of the BCH network almost at their disposal. Like you said, they're probably going to start going after, smaller chains. So do you think, um, well, one, I wanted to ask, how do you think that's going to go? Do you think they're going to immediately start to go do that? They're going to tack some smaller ones to see what the response is, or are they just going to start going after big boys like Dash and Litecoin? And then as well, is that going to result in a lot of these smaller projects with a little bit of hash power? There's a gentleman that put out a Excel spreadsheet that basically told you how much it would cost a 51% attack, chains
Hmm.
like Verge or whatever. And is this going to lead to kind of a conglomeration of different projects and basically, communities either giving up on their projects to throw their hash power behind someone who can actually protect their networks, right? Jumping onto Ethereum or
Hmm.
something like
Hmm.
that, or like, I don't know. What are your thoughts on how that's all going to flesh?
Yeah, so one of the things that this battle is going to show, and I think it's important to, we've had one other fork that was similar to this where there was no replay protection in that way, and people keep bringing it up, and that was the ETH and ETC fork. It's different because they don't use the unspent transaction output model. They use a balance model, so they don't use the UTXO model. So it's different the way that the transactions play. But what we're going to see is that, and Ryan Charles did a video today that really showed that he was understanding this as well. I think that he's got a good handle now on what's going on. So he's definitely someone to listen to as his own thoughts evolve on this. This is unprecedented. But what we're going to get to see is that more than one chain can exist within a network and can exist peacefully, and that you don't need replay protection. This is something that Daniel Krawitz has been saying since the beginning, again, where he said replay protection is stupid, and I didn't understand it until I got hours to talk with him about it. So people shouldn't feel bad if this takes a long time for them to get. Um, because then what you have is you have the chance to experiment where I can send out transactions that will play across every chain. So you could have a dash on the Bitcoin Cash network. Well, that won't be allowed because that won't be allowed by the dictator, the new dictator of BCH. But you could have a dash on a BTC network. Then what happens in that case? That's actually a much, as you say, people coming together. It's much more cooperative. This is how you fight off the pirates. Is that it's like, okay, fine. I don't want that. I don't want your block time. I don't want your block size. Fine. But if these guys say, no, we're going to fork it, we're going to have a shared history, but we're going to try this masternodes thing. And you know what? If nobody's into it or whatever, then kind of our chain just goes away. But it's actually okay if our chain goes away because everybody who didn't want to take that experiment could just only do transactions that played across both chains. So you get a chance to experiment, and then what you really have is your coins become this unified coin, this sort of index. And so I think what people are going to learn from this is that the way to attack is to split a chain, but the way to defend is to split a chain, because then you have your brothers on your chain with your algorithm ready to defend that network, because they have skin in the game on that network. So what you really want is, it's not that you want to play this game that BTC has been playing where it's like, no, get out of here, shitcoiners, B cashers, be gone, have your replay protection. That's an attack on Bitcoin. Actually, no, it's not an attack on Bitcoin. Actually, you want immigrants to your chain. You want them to be there to grow the chain, because who knows? Maybe it turns out that they are able to attract more hash power than you are. And so that keeps your chain safe. Just the simple fact that there's more hash power there, more honest hash power. And so it's interesting, but people have framed it as though I have come off anti Craig or something. I don't personally appreciate Craig for the things that he has said about me personally, but I'm very much able to put those aside. As I say, I was on reality TV for 6 seasons. I've heard a lot worse. I've got a pretty thick skin when it comes to haters on Twitter. I think what Craig is doing, somebody had to do, and I think whoever did it had to be kind of a special individual, and he's definitely a special individual in a lot of ways. They had to really believe it. They had to really take it seriously. The most important thing for Bitcoin's value is that people believe that it's real. That's the most important thing, is that people believe that it's real. And Craig believes that it's real. He believes that it's real so hard that he's willing to invent a way to go to war on it, real war. And so I'm not anti Craig. I think that he is playing a crucial role in the development of Bitcoin overall. Um, do I want him to be dictator? Not really. I mean, I don't want there to be a dictator of Bitcoin. And so what I'm hopeful for is that you know, people will learn and they'll come together, and the Bitcoin that my children enjoy will be so much stronger and more vibrant than it is now, in part thanks to Craig.
What do you think? I mean, because basically, there's a lot of skepticism from the BTC side that when you said that eventually he would be able to, if successful, he would be able to eventually marshal enough resources to bring attacks on the BTC chain, and the majority of the people, and in the BTC side were I didn't see anybody. I haven't spent as much time on Twitter this last week, but I really didn't see anybody that was necessarily publicly saying like that. Yeah, this is a possibility at all. They were quite dismissive and didn't really want to seemingly spend any kind of time looking into it. How do you see that going from, say, the November, let's just say the Bitcoin.com and Jihan capitulate very quickly. November 16th, Craig is the dictator. How do you see it going forward from there? What's the kind of brief ballpark steps that would be brought up to where to kind of lay it out for BTC folks that this actually could be a true threat to their chain as well?
It's really funny how history is always right there in front of us, but we think that it doesn't repeat. Any would-be conqueror, you go through go through history, and there's always some city, state, or nation that thinks that their high walls or the ocean that separates them is going to protect them, and they see, you know, neighboring nations being ravaged, and they say, "Ah, that's not us. What are you talking about? We have this great civilization here. We could never fall. We could never fall to those barbarians. They're just, look at them. They're just barbarians. They're nothing. They're stupid. They don't know what they're doing." Those are famous last words. They're not prepared at all, and I don't think that they've really done the calculus, because this is the calculus that I did, and it became very, very obvious about why BTC is, if Craig is successful, why BTC is in danger, why they should care. And it's very, very simple. From the beginning, and it's no mystery that Bitcoin has a lot of very, very powerful enemies. The most powerful entities, it's either one of two things, right? Either one, Bitcoin is not a threat to banks and governments. If somebody says, well, no, banks and governments, they're very, very happy with Bitcoin. Banks and governments would love to see Bitcoin continue to exist and grow. If that's what you believe, and you're on the BTC side, if you believe that banks and governments are friendly toward the growth of Bitcoin, then you know what? Bitcoin is not, there's no threat to Bitcoin from Craig. But if you believe, like I think every core believers should believe, considering that good old Adam Back and most of the old schoolers, Gavin and all of them, those are all cypherpunks. They're all the whole idea of the cypherpunks was that, oh, the government's a problem, banks are a problem. That was the whole basis of creating Bitcoin. So, if that's the case, then when Craig takes over, when Craig, I say when because I do believe it's kind of a foregone conclusion, but he will have shown that he can take over, that he knows the tactics, and he knows how to take over a Bitcoin network that is so, they think that they're different, but on this front, in this context, there's almost no difference between the Nakamoto consensus, the way that it's done with Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash. So really all you're talking about is scale. So they need 10 times more resources. They need 10 times more resources to do to BTC what they're gonna do to BCH because there's 10 times more hash power. They just need 10x of more resources investment. You think the literally the people who print money would be the ones investing in making that happen. And then they would have control of Bitcoin through Craig. You think they're not going to be able to find the funding to do that? Anybody who thinks that hasn't thought about this for even 30 seconds. Or they're so completely mind controlled because they're stuck in the core cult that they're not even worth listening to. Like, this is really something that any thinking person who sits for even 5 seconds will realize. But I think everybody will realize it come the end of this hash war. It's going to be very, very clear.
Yeah, that's what I was a little bit surprised at, and you laid it out a lot more clear for me now. Is that it was only really when the dismissing of it was like, well, we have 10x the hash power. It's not, this is just a kind of like a mosquito on our network. Where the only difference is money. Money is not a problem at all in this world, and it's definitely a lot harder on the principled, I guess, especially from their perspective, the principled BTC side, than it is from the what they would view as the unprincipled Craig Wright side. And I don't know if it's a matter of where after the scaling debate, where they feel that they won, and SegWit and 2x was SegWit 2x was defeated, and I don't know if it's a matter of resting on their laurels and feeling as though like we've won this, and if these nefarious state actors wanted to end Bitcoin, they could have done so in 2013, and they didn't do it. Like, that would have been a lot easier.
But they couldn't have.
Okay.
But they couldn't have. That's what people are not understanding. Was that it? Yes, because they couldn't have, because Satoshi's code had not been cracked. This is the case again. That's why I compare it to like the high city walls. There's been case through case through case throughout history. It's dramatized very well. I think it was a Netflix show, Marco Polo, that it was sort of supposed to be Marco Polo with in the court of Kublai Khan. But there's this one storyline where they're sort of trying to take over this Chinese city, and the whole idea is that these city walls are impenetrable. No army can get through the city walls. But then Marco Polo sort of designs out a ballista or a catapult to, and they use this ballista and it knocks down the walls. And it's like, that's been true throughout history. And Nakamoto consensus has been city walls. But once you have a catapult, once you can hurl rocks and boiling fire and diseased bodies and all of the above, those walls really don't mean a damn thing anymore. And that's what they're not realizing, is that someone has found a way to offensively use Nakamoto consensus to use within the rules of Nakamoto consensus to attack, to not just attack, because that was always the, and you'll still see this where people still don't get it because we've been so long at the economic incentives. That's what's in the white papers, that Satoshi basically says, well, yeah, somebody could attack, but what keeps him from attacking is not that it's technically hard to do. What keeps him from attacking is that he has an economic incentive not to, because why would you spend the money to receive a token of reduced value? The whole idea behind it is that, like, well, no, you would want to see the network strong. And I've look, I've been somebody who's said this too when things have come out about Jihan Wu. But Jihan is playing a different game. Jihan he's been honest and he's been well rewarded for that. He had no intention of attacking any chain because he's in it to make money. See, but Craig and Calvin are looking from a much longer view. In their view, they're like, we would rather drop the price of our holdings to zero and take control of the entire network and then build the value back up quickly.
Sorry to butt in, but that kind of
Go ahead.
you know, has me thinking this, that it, we do talk about the genius of Satoshi and combining all these things, cryptography, game theory, and economics, and it seems very much like what you're saying is that what Satoshi was saying, nobody would do this. It doesn't make any sense why they would drop the value of the thing that they want to have, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that seems to me to be a very engineer mindset, one that kind of maybe, I don't know, either ignores or has trouble seeing clearly the human aspect of a deeper human aspect of game theory, and that whether you want to call it spite or the long game or a combination of both, that some people, as the saying from the movie says, some people just want to watch the world burn as well, right? And they're willing to do that, whether for the short term or completely overall, for completely irrational reasons or seemingly irrational reasons.
Yeah, I mean, it's I wrote about this in my Counter Markets article this month. I was talking about the hero's journey, sort of as it relates to this, and I was specifically bringing up Star Wars. And one of the things that is really super cool about Star Wars, actually, and I actually put a link in that article. But if somebody goes and they just type in George Lucas, Joseph Campbell award into YouTube, they'll see there was this back in the 80s. George Lucas actually gave an award. He was speaking at an award, gave this award to Joseph Campbell, who's the author of Hero with a Thousand Faces, which is about mythological archetypes and the hero's journey. People who like Jordan Peterson, that was why I immediately was like, wow, because I had loved Joseph Campbell, and Jordan Peterson was just like building on top of that. So this is, and you see how that, like, anytime you talk about these things or explore the hero's journey and the monomyths, people love it. But George Lucas says in this, giving this award, he says, I had years ago, about 10 years ago, I wanted to write a children's movie, and I wanted to do a modern day fairy tale. And I ran across The Hero with a Thousand Faces. And after reading more of Joe's books, I realized how I could do this. If I hadn't have found the Hero with a Thousand Faces, I'd probably still be writing Star Wars. He basically just, it's just everything that Joseph Campbell put into that book about what the quintessential monomyth is. And so these are Jungian archetypes that you're seeing played out in Star Wars. And it's the reason why it has grabbed people and not let go, because it's just kind of the perfect human story that is the encapsulation of all the great stories. So everything from Jesus and Buddha to the Trojan War and to the Lord of the Rings and the Matrix. It goes on and on and on. The top 10 highest grossing movie franchises of all time are all the hero's journey. We love to be told this story. Harry Potter, the Marvel Universe, James Bond, go down the list, Lord of the Rings, all of them, right? It's all the same story retold over and over and over again. So I think the best way to understand the best way to understand Craig and Calvin is to understand them as Darth Vader and the Emperor. That's the best way to understand these guys. And that's the path that they're on. And what's crazy about it is Craig understands himself that way. Because if you go down his Twitter feed, you'll see Darth Vader over and over and over again in reference to himself. So he even sees himself that way. He even recognizes that that's the role that he's playing. But that's really, really awesome, because that means that we're in the middle of something that's really important. When you see these archetypes play out in ways that really matter, that are this clear, like it means that we're really in the middle of something super, super important. And so it's yeah, does he want to see the world burn? A little bit, but you got to have that. You got to have that. And I think that there are some unseen heroes in the world of Bitcoin who are now going to get really a chance to shine. And I think that's what we should all be looking forward to. There are a lot of smart people, a lot of motivated people, and this conflict has actually brought them out of the woodwork. I've been talking with a lot of them, and seeing the solutions that people are coming up with is amazing. So, I think if people are willing, now is the time to hodl. Now is the time to hodl. Don't do anything during the battle. And afterwards, I would say, no matter who wins, buy up that rock bottom BCH, because it's going through the roof, man. That was not financial advice. That was just my own opinion.
Okay.
But yeah, man, it's we're in the midst of some really, really interesting times.
And do you think that, I mean, some people would draw the conclusion, especially in from, like, say, the Ethereum or other side, that maybe this is that other governance models, given that there's now this crack in the proof of work governance model in the Nakamoto consensus, that maybe proof of stake or some other governance model might be something that, not that they don't have their own issues, right? But what would you say to someone that goes like, well, this is why proof of stake's better, then you don't have to worry about someone like Craig coming in?
I think they're wrong. And I don't think that's been such a weird criticism where people have been like, "Well, if Craig's able to take over BCH, it proves that proof of work doesn't work." No, what it proves is that you don't understand how deep proof of work is. That it's not just the proof of work that is the machines that are mining. And Craig he's hit on that it's not machines. People got to get that out of their head. It's not machines. It's the proof of work is a human concept. It's proof of your own labor. Because what we're doing is we're following the whole idea of why a blockchain is valuable is because other people have decided to make it valuable. The miners, the devs. What we're talking about is, what does it cost to buy an ASIC rig? Well, you're going to have to pay for it somehow. And fundamentally, how you got that was through your labor. So it all goes back to human labor. It's proof of human labor. It's proof of human work. So at the end of the line, at the end of the chain of all of it, is not machines, it's people. And we're trusting that other people find it valuable. Other people find it valuable enough to work. That's the proof of work. And when you have a majority of the people who are swirling around that, who are honest and are not trying to attack, then society works. And if people get willfully blind, if people stop working, if they get lazy, and that's what we saw with Lambo, with Moon, with HODL, thinking that, oh yeah, it's just Bitcoin's just going to go up in price. I think it is no coincidence that this is happening after a time of extreme stability, maybe one of the least volatile times in Bitcoin's history this year, when we saw very little movement in price and people's expectation of, well, and upsetness and entitledness that their holdings should increase in value because this is Bitcoin. Why is the Bitcoin price not going up? This doesn't make any sense. And these idiots on CNBC talking about the price of Bitcoin will be at 10,000. It'll be at 10,000 by the end of the year. Why? Say why. Say why. Say what has changed. Say what is better. Say what has been built. Nothing. Nothing. Well, Craig is gonna he's shaking shit up. He's gonna try to make a change. And I do not like the idea of 51% attacking. I do not support that. I do not like Craig's overall attitude towards people. I do not support that. I think that he would be a terrible person, horrible person to be in charge of the direction of a chain or multiple chains. He clearly is a dictator. But that's exactly the type of person that you need to wake everybody else up and get them to building. You know, he's a great person to it's a little Krugman-esque, right? But he's a great person to break the windows, to get people building. He's doing it. And I'm seeing it. I'm seeing people working again. I'm seeing actually cool projects being built just to sort of circumvent Craig. I'm seeing people have to actually think about security again in new ways and interesting ways. And so it's like, we should be thanking Craig. We should beat him. We should beat him back and show that Nakamoto consensus works, and show that proof of work works, and show that we who have put in the work will defend that work. That's what I think we're going to end up seeing at the end of this, and it's going to prove that proof of work works.
It's very interesting that you say that, as far as him being a polarizing figure that's needed, because if I think it was, well, there's been multiple, just historical examples, right? But also, I remember, just kind of clicked in my head, Reagan's speech at the UN, this kind of weird, perplexing speech, where he talked about like how fast would the nations of the world come together. And this is in the midst of the Cold War, right? So everyone's pointing nuclear weapons, or two people are pointing nuclear weapons at each other, and people are worried about the whole world being destroyed. And talk about how fast would we come together and put aside ideological differences, in the face of like an alien invasion, right? An outside force that was threatening us all. And it seems like that would be something that is needed, because it does, this last, 6 to 9 months has been, basically after we dropped from 10,000 into the 6,000s, it's been pretty steady, and everyone's just been kind of kicking back. Crypto Twitter is pretty quiet for the most part, other than a few back and forths. And it's been relatively quiet in the community, and most people are either building or have given up and gone home. And it is very interesting, kind of in the philosophical, mythological sense of like this specter appearing on the horizon, right? And I guess if you want to go deeper into kind of the theological symbolism of, I wouldn't go as far to call the Antichrist, right? But was, someone that most people didn't understand, and at first people didn't take seriously, and then all of a sudden was, became, this overarching figure who threatened the whole world, right? And you need that like, go back to the hero story. But hero stories are common for a reason. They're not just stories, they also speak to a deeper truth. But at the same time, do you feel that the hero story is a archetype because humanity needs it to be true, or because these things will, at a deeper metaphysical level, always play out that way?
I think it's closer to the latter. That's really what Joseph Campbell, it's interesting in reading Hero with a Thousand Faces, which he wrote in the late 40s. And it's absolutely as true now as, it reads like somebody wrote it yesterday, but I guess that's because it's about mythological archetypes, right? Really what he gets so close to saying but doesn't say it is he really seems like he's hinting at the idea that this is somehow in our DNA, that it's almost like an instinct. It almost is our inbred social organizational structure, and it's similar to what Jung said as well, that these things, since we're a little more of a conscious being, they're animating and motivating us and sort of drawing us together and enabling us to have this shared reality. but they come from, I don't know, whether it's something organic. Somebody like Terrence McKenna might say that they're coming from another dimension, and we're just sort of communicating them, and it's some other higher intelligence communicating with us. Others might say it's God. For whatever reason, these things play out. And all of us who are playing it out, we're not really, most of us, conscious of what we're doing. Even when we're, I doubt, because I have never, Craig writes a lot, and I think that if he was savvy to the hero's journey, that he would have brought it up. But the fact that he's identifying with Vader is like, wow, dude, seriously? Like, you're channeling something at this point. And so I think really what it is that when you see the hero's journey narrative pop up in real life, that is your cue to pay attention. But the interesting thing about it is whenever we see the hero's journey pop up, we can't help but pay attention, because that's what the hero's journey is there to make us do. It's to make us pay attention. And film creators have clearly figured that out. If you want a high grossing movie, just tell a hero's journey and people will line up to see endless movie after movie after movie after movie telling the same story with just a little bit of a different twist. So now we get to see it play out in real life in this really cool space that is Bitcoin. And yeah, it's really, I mean, I feel really, really like honored to and proud and excited and lucky to be around to see this, because it's really cool. I think people should be paying a lot of attention, because there's a lot to learn, and there's a lot of lessons that we're going to need to take into the next step of this thing.
And I think that's especially a lot of people early on. Like my own journey was, the first time I actually heard about crypto was on Jack's show. I think back in 2012, and it was one of those things like somebody mentions it, and I had no background in it, right? So I just kind of blew it off, and then about I think it was about 2013 early on, I started to kind of go, okay, maybe this is something told me, right? And a lot of times like now I have that feeling that I don't know if you watch that show Halt Catch Fire on AMC.
No, I've never seen it. No.
So it basically starts off like early in the computer days, and where they're still building these, like the first like actual PCs for home use. IBM
Oh, that sounds cool.
it was a really neat show, and it's about kind of the genesis of home computing. And then the last season and a half was about the internet, and them kind of realizing like, and throughout that show, like you see, this is still people building stuff in garages, and kind of going like, well, this internet thing's really neat. You'd be able to do like a chat board, and you could talk to each other, and you can sell stuff, to people all around. And that kind of that energy, right? Where people are realizing that this is something bigger. Well, by that time, IBM was around, but it was still kind of like this, it's for companies. It's, this is not really anything other than we're just going to have, spreadsheets that we can send to each other at disparate offices, and we don't have to like handwrite it out and send it in the mail, right? It's kind of a neat idea. But you could tell like those people that are passionate about that started to build computers at a young age in their garages, right? They realized that there was something here that is going to be bigger than anybody realizes, right? And that's what I kind of felt like when I first really kind of got, I think most people do. This is kind of a very common story. It's almost cliche at this point, where you get bit by the Bitcoin bug, and once it finally clicks and you go like, this is something. It's not just Lambos and Moon. And I mean, because when I got into 2013, I started mining. Litecoin was actually, I was mining alts mostly, and stuff like Ron Paul coin and all this other kind of goofy stuff when it came out, and I was selling for Bitcoin, and that was right when it did the run up to 1,000. And then right after that, you did the crash right after Mt. Gox. But even throughout the time, I was like, this is going to be something. And there was, we moved, and I ended up selling my mining rig equipment, and I kind of just only did cursory reading. I kind of got out of it. Mostly I just got distracted. And it's kind of one of my biggest regrets also, is not keeping in the community and building something throughout those, that year and a half that I kind of took off. until like 2016, 2017 ish. And it's just that, the reason was because like I knew this was something, not just price. I mean,
Hmm.
that's a nice ancillary effect to your, your time and mental investment. But like it is something. It's something that's made it to the uh than to just, being a new money, right? It's more than just that. And it's also interesting that throughout all these years, and I am kind of, you know it kind of correlates also with pop culture, The Walking Dead, right? So in Walking Dead, throughout the first few seasons, always the zombies are the worst thing. So every time there's like 10
Hmm.
zombies show up, it's like the biggest thing for those first few seasons, that 10 zombies show up and it's like a big battle. Now 10 zombies show up and they're done in like 13 seconds. And the main
Right.
enemies are people. It always ends up being people are the biggest enemies of people. It's not the outside actor, right? And you see this in a lot of movies, whether it's Alien Invasions or Terminator, right?
Hmm.
It's always the internal, um, the human threat is always the biggest threat. And I kind of go like now, you know, as we're talking, going like how have I not been able to view more clearly that it's not the larger, systems and whatever you want to call them, whether it's just, central banks or even the larger systems of that as being the biggest threats, which they are, right? And they also do play a part, but
Sure.
it's still the people, and especially the people that are on the inside, that always end up being, and you see that within these mythological tales. There's always that um you know the not necessarily the feuding brothers, but you always have that person that backstabs, either the
Hmm.
hero or the community or their city, that ends up being that catalyst that leads to the larger crisis.
Yeah, it's I think, and it's kind of sort of my crypto savage theory is I really don't think that those entities that have been the sort of boogeyman for so long, the banksters and the governments, the state, I don't think they really see us. Not really. I don't think they really see the culture. And I do think that the culture is what has always given Bitcoin value. Well, if you think about it, it's the only thing that can give it value. The trading, I don't think we're going to have the type of run-ups and volatility that's happened before. And I think that as we move into the phase of, especially now with these wars about to happen, this is actually going to probably scare off a certain type of investor, but it's going to bring in another type of investor. But see, once you're in, you are within the culture at that point. And so I think that this is going to grow and the culture is going to grow. And I think that, this conflict inside it's exciting, and it's going to bring in a lot of people, and people are going to get excited by the personalities and the drama of it and all of that. And you know what? That's really good. I mean, you look at these, you look at the elections, you turn on CNN, and what's funny is now that I'm within this culture, and it's totally exactly my crypto savage thesis, that I'm in this culture, we've got this war going about to start. I I didn't give a fuck about the election. Excuse my French there. I didn't care at all about these US elections. I was like, I could care less because that doesn't even really concern me, because 20 years from now, what's happening now is going to be what will have been important. What's happening now inside of Bitcoin is what's going to be important to me, what's going to be important to my children. And so we're already making that cultural separation, I feel, because that was another thing. I was talking about this with my wife, was, here we are. Bitcoin Cash has a market cap of, I believe it's 10 billion. I want to say, um, at least 10 billion. And through this whole thing with Craig Wright and all of this, so we're potentially talking about, $10 billion being wiped out completely. Just it could go to zero. He's threatening to take it to zero. That's a large chunk of money. But interestingly enough, it's not hacking. There's nothing illegal under any government statute that they're doing by doing this, even though they're about to wipe out value. And you ask yourself, like, oh, wow. So these new hash wars, like, there's not even a role that the government can. The only way a government could get involved would be to buy some mining rigs and start mining. But hey, that would be good. That would be really good if we could if we could get high levels of energy being thrown at our blockchains. Yeah, that's only going to increase value. So it's very interesting to think about that. It's like, yeah, we're going to get to play this out all on our own within our own culture. There's not even a way or a place for government to get involved. That's really cool and really interesting that we're about to have these wars that people don't even know about, that they don't even understand what's happening. This is a lot like the early years of Christianity. I recommend to everybody the book by Darmaid McCullough, Christianity, the First 3,000 Years. The early years, like say the first 300 years, were super interesting. Nobody knows about them. There were all kinds of battles exactly like this, all kinds of weird little sects of people, and they were fighting over minutia like what we're fighting over in this BCH thing, which is really like the weirdest sort of strange out there minutia. Oh yeah, they were killing each other over that stuff. And so it's just history repeating itself, man. And so, you think the Romans at that time, they didn't give a damn what that these people were killing each other and going to war, and assassinations of a bishop on the road from Egypt to, Damascus or whatever, and he gets assassinated. The Romans didn't care. Well, who are these? This weird little cult, this weird little sect, well, they're not threatening the government. Okay. Yeah, fast forward 2,000 years, fast forward 1,000 years, and yeah, that little cult is in control of most of the world. So, it's I think that's what we're dealing with. I think we're seeing history repeat itself in this really interesting way, and here we are.
It's interesting. We talked about maybe governments starting to run mining nodes and to increase hash power to protect against these sorts of things. When I was talking to Caitlin Long on when, interestingly enough, it just happened to be right when the backed announcement came out. Um, we were talking about ways that Wall Street, if they wanted to, mess around with that, is that most of them are not going to be, we posited that, or we're thinking that they would not be running, even though they might have, $1 billion, let's just say, in Bitcoin and assets under management, they're not going to be running, 10,000 nodes. They're probably going to be running, a handful or so, right? So they weren't going to be able to have that kind of, the hash power like they would, like someone like Bitmain or someone like that. That's not their goal. But would this not be in their interests, their financial interests, as well as, you could maybe even put it under being good stewards of their investors' money, to start to actually get involved in bulking up the network to protect against their investors, money that's been invested in, in Bitcoin that they are managing under their, not necessarily, happening in the next few months, right? But, you know, in some future of, a year or two, where it's only going to get larger. The amount of money that's institutional money, that's always been kind of like the thing everyone's been holding onto their hopium and their pipes, right? As the institutional money's coming any day.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, it will. It's an asset that can be held. I mean, it'll be kind of interesting to see what these hash wars actually kind of do to it. But would not one possible outcome be where these larger financial institutions are starting to invest in that, just like they would any other form of security of their assets? Or is that a
Ooh,
little bit too
I mean,
heady for them?
yeah, I think that this is going to change what Bitcoin means for everybody, and that's going to mean institutional investors as well. I think that it took a long time for them to think that Bitcoin was safe. But the question in their mind was never that they were going to lose their money. That wasn't what it was about, is Bitcoin safe or not? The safety was more a political safety. It was, oh, is this for money laundering and drug smuggling? It was not, uh, is some raider going to come in and in one day unannounced possibly destroy the value of this thing? Investors want to invest in something that they can understand. And Bitcoin is already hard
Yeah.
enough to
Yep.
understand already. And so just as they're able to wrap their heads around a blockchain, and it's funny because like I was just these documentarians were just interviewing me the other day, and they were like, it was funny that they were running down, oh yeah, we've been going around, and it's like, of course the blockchain technology thing, like that whole, and I was just like, I was like laughing internally because I was like, oh my God, you guys have no idea what's coming. Like, yeah, this, blockchains is decentralization. It's, how it keeps it safe and how it could be the solution. And I'm like, yeah, well, I'd hate to inform you that somebody may have just found a way to just take these things down. And so they're like, what? So just as people started to wrap their heads barely around Nakamoto consensus, barely around the idea of a blockchain, here comes this entire paradigm shift. No, I actually think that, as I say, it's going to be about this culture coming up. And I think that it's going to be about young people seeing this as an uncharted place to go and adventure and to homestead and to stake your flag and to fight in some of these wars and to be a hero. And by being a hero, either a protector or a raider, that you're going to end up with some tokens that are going to be very, very valuable. And I think that that's what the future of this thing is. I think that may be the new gold rush. And I don't think it's going to be institutional money. They might play around with Bitcoin BTC, but I think doing anything with any of the alts, and anything that is proof of work, that is doing smart contracts, or I mean, imagine, I'm feeling bad now for like the Ravencoin guys, because Ravencoin is totally Bitcoin. I mean, you can go in the GitHub repo and you can see where it forked off. There's only 3,000 commits since it forked off from Core. It's a 100% Bitcoin. So, and it's got even less hash power than BCH by an order of magnitude. So I'm feeling really bad for them, because it's like, how are you going to tell somebody to put their company's stocks on your chain when sitting over here is dun 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 dun, and here come the ships, you know what I mean? And Craig is coming in and he's just demolishing your Raven coin. Like, how are you going to feel confident putting tokens on that? You're not. So I think we're in a whole new realm, and it's not almost impossible. It's impossible to know exactly where we go next, but it's playing out an old familiar tale. It's an old familiar tale.
And I had two last questions for you. One would be, and for anybody listening, this is not financial advice. This is just the opinions of the people on this show. It means absolutely nothing. Take it as you want. It's for educational purposes only. But to anybody that's listening now prior to the 15th, or even after, as with the threats to other proof of work chains and other smaller alts, or basically anybody with less hash power than PCH at this moment, what would your advice for them to be, if as far as for like practical things that they can do, as far as for you said younger people, they can as they learn how to code and become developers themselves and actually take part in this war, because that's
Hmm.
where it's going to be fought, as well as
Absolutely.
within in the memes as well, as far as for
Oh,
the
that's
minds.
huge. That's as big. That's as big, if not bigger, than the code.
And what would your advice for people that either go like, I don't necessarily want to get involved with this, but I do have X crypto assets or whatever. Should I be running to larger hash power coin, like BTC, or what should I be doing at this moment? Just holding off and just seeing where the dust settles.
So here's how you want to think about it. Price should, now mind you, this is crypto, so we say what should happen, but this is my take on it, is The whole idea of the hash war is to drop the price. If you can't drop the price, then there's no reason to have a hash war. So you should expect during the battle, just simply because there is a lack of trust from the exchanges and they've closed their windows, you should expect to see sell offs as soon as the windows open. So that should mean um, that you have a lower price directly after the battle is done than you did when the battle started. So take that as you will. There's going to be a chain under attack in the middle of a war. Like I say, I don't think, my own personal opinion is, I don't think it can take longer than 3 weeks. If you just want to sit it out and you just want to hodl, then you know what? Paper wallet is good. Even if you just have your passphrase for your wallet, and you just let it sit, don't spend it, sit on it, it'll be fine. The chain's not going to be reorged to previous to the battle. So the history for sure is going to be at least from the 15th. And when the dust settles, that miners, whoever wins, is going to want to pick that chain back up and start mining it right away and securing it right away. And then you'll be able to spend. Spending during the battle is going to be, it could be risky. If you have coins that are only valid on one chain, either because somebody sent it to you or because your wallet is doing something in the background that you don't know about, and you start spending those coins and that chain ends up as a loser and destroyed, you could lose that transaction history. Doesn't necessarily mean you would lose your money. If you're the person who spent it, especially not, you might get it back. But if you're a merchant accepting it or an exchange accepting it, you could very well just see that completely wiped out and gone. Um, so yeah, I mean, that's the best way to protect yourself. And that's what you should probably expect from the price. But what I would say is, no matter who wins, my what I anticipate is that although the price will be low when the battle first ends, I think that we'll probably see a huge spike in price, particularly if this can be ended quickly. If it can be ended quickly and decisively, I think that we'll see a huge spike in price. If it's drawn out, I think you're going to see really just the price deflate for a long time. And Craig and Calvin have both said that they're more than willing to do that to be able to take control of the chain.
And my last question was going to be directed at Bitcoin, BTC, as well as people of other projects. You know, anybody who's listening that may be part of, you know, the Dash community, Namecoin, Monero, or whatever. And what parting words would you have for them, and what also would you recommend that they start doing immediately?
Well, the first thing is to just pay attention first, especially the core devs and people who are mining and particularly interested. You're to ignore this, you ignore it at your own peril, because it's going to be something that is going to be coming, whether it comes from Craig or whether it comes from raiders. You need to start at least thinking about this. And also thinking about ways that we can work together. I think that's the most important part about this. Those of us who are honest app developers, miners, just regular end users who want to use this, and on Dash and BCH and BTC and Litecoin, we have, and Monero and Zcash, we all have the same desires. We all have the same incentives to see this ecosystem at peace, and we can work together. We've divided ourselves in a big way, in a very tribal way, but I do think that the only way that we're going to survive this is to start to find the ways that we are more alike, and we are so alike. Go back through your GitHub repository and see when you forked from core, and you'll realize that we are all really coming from the same place, and we are all really trying to follow the vision of Satoshi. And I don't think that the vast majority of us think that that vision includes going out and actively hunting down and 51%ing chains. And so I think there's a vast majority of us who are peaceful people, but if the peaceful among us do nothing and we just remain willfully blind, then when it comes for us, we're caught with our pants down. So talk to each other, pay attention. Maybe people aren't paying attention now, but certainly after this battle happens, I think to go back, there's so much history. Go back through the videos, go back through the Twitter threads, educate yourself so that you'll know what to do the next time comes. And through that education, you might just end up making a nice, tidy profit as well. So it's definitely in your best interest.
Well, I'd really like to thank you for coming on and spending about an hour and 45 minutes here on, and I'll be including all the links, the books, articles, anything that we kind of mentioned in here in the show notes. And Vin, where can people find you, contact you?
So VinArmani.com is my site that's got links to my podcast, and I put the videos up there. I do a Friday night kind of fun, cool podcast. At VIN Armani on Twitter that's where I'm at most of the time. So yeah, selfownership.me if you want to get my last book, which has towards the end, I start talking about what we were talking about, the emergence of the crypto savage. And then I'll be working on it looks like this hash war is going to really make for the nice sort of, I think, glue for my next book. I had been looking for what that would be, called Render Unto Caesar. And so I think it's going to be absolutely perfect for that. So be on the lookout for that as well. Thank you for having me on, Dustin. This was a lot of fun. I had been thinking about all of these things, and it's great to get on and be able to talk with somebody who can actually get it, and I think frame it in a really cool way for people. So I hope people enjoy this.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that, and we'll have you on again soon.
Great, sounds great. Thank you, man.